So the German Empire, or the German nation state, which was created in 1871 after the Franco-Prussian War, brought together all German-speaking people over a wide part of Europe. And after the First World War, the German defeat in the First World War, the terms of the Treaty of Versailles saw a breaking up of that empire of German-speaking peoples. East Prussia became a separate area divided off by the Danzig corridor, which became part of a new Polish state. New states were created in Czechoslovakia, which took some German lands as well. Germany also lost some land in Denmark. And the Austro-Hungarian Empire was completely blown up into its constituent pieces. So, Hungary became a separate country, Austria, Transylvania went into Romania, and the Second World War was sparked by the German invasion of Poland, again, which was to take back the lands in Western Poland, which had been lost following Versailles. At the same time, the Russians invaded the eastern part of Poland, so it wasn't just one invader coming into Poland, but the terms of the British and the French was that they would protect Poland against German aggression. So France and Britain declared war on Germany in 1939, sent a large expeditionary force to Belgium in 1939, which was positioned to take on the Germans. The expeditionary force was surrounded by the Germans in a military maneuver that took the British and French troops by surprise. They were forced back to Dunkirk, where they managed to escape. However, the exercise was a complete disaster for the British. It meant that most of the armaments that they had were left on the beaches. Around 70,000 men were either captured or killed in the operation. Over 300,000 escaped. But the ability for Britain to mount a campaign in the near future was pretty much zero. So the Americans are now coming into England, the friendly invasion, and large numbers of troops, hundreds of thousands, are amassing in England, ready for an invasion of the European mainland. This now becomes an American-led operation. And, having declared war in the first place, England, Britain is now very much the junior partner. And, it's sort of marking this transition from the old colonial empires that called the shots, i.e. Britain and France, in the 19th and early 20th century. Now it would be the Americans and the Russians and the Soviet Union who would be calling the shots in Europe. The invasion takes place in June 1944 in Normandy. The Americans think it's going to be a quick victory, just like the generals had thought in the First World War. Everything would be over by Christmas time. Unfortunately, they were wrong. They were wrong again with the invasion of Normandy. It took them a couple of months just to get out of Normandy. And then there was an attritional battle to get from there to Berlin that took the best part of a year. Large numbers of casualties were taken on board. The Russians invaded from the east, and between the two, so the Western powers and the Soviet Union, the Germans were unable to continue fighting successfully on two fronts. The war came to an end in May 1945, and the aftermath from that was that Europe was split down the middle between an eastern half that was dominated by the Soviet Union, and a western half that came under American influence. This changing political landscape led to rapid decolonisation of the British and French empires that were orchestrated to a large extent by the Americans and the Soviet Union. They were keen to see the colonies disappear so that they could then influence the political situations in those ex-colonial territories. So what triggers rapid decolonisation after the Second World War was the Suez Crisis in 1956, when Suez Canal was nationalised by the Egyptian president Nasser, and a force of British and French troops sort of invaded the territory to reclaim the canal. The response of both the Americans and the Soviet Union was extremely negative to this action. The Americans wanted Britain to withdraw its troops immediately. There was a lot of positioning, both by the Americans and the Soviets, to gain the favour of Nasser, who was a big figure in the Arab world, out that part of the world. He was, had a lot of influence across the region. So, frankly, the English and the French were getting in the way of American foreign policy. It meant that America took some rather, sort of harsh views on Britain. It sought to impose certain sanctions. It sold British bonds that undermined sterling. It basically created a situation that made it untenable for the British to keep their troops in the Suez region, and they withdrew with the tail between their legs, and that really was the death knell of the British colonial system. The British Empire pretty much collapsed over the next 15 years following on from that.